dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force of Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's get right to it. The NFL has doubled down on what I consider their fence straddling regarding the anthem protests.
The NFL is out tonight with a new policy on the national anthem, insisting that players on the field must stand for the anthem or that the team will be fined. Players taking a knee to protest became a national controversy after President Trump condemned it. Well, tonight the players say they were not consulted, and at least one team says that if their players kneel, they'll pay for them. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
Tonight, the NFL addressing the controversy over national anthem protests, announcing a new policy.
If anyone is on the field and is disrespectful to the anthem or the flag, there would be a fine from the league against the team.
Under the new rules, players may stay in the locker room during the Star-Spangled Banner, but if they are on the field, they must stand, or the team could face fines.
We want people to be respectful to the national anthem. We want people to stand.
The rule change coming 2 years after former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick first started kneeling to protest racial inequality and police brutality. President Trump pressuring the league for months.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a off the field right now, out, he's fired.
Just days ago, the president praising NASCAR.
They do indeed, Brian, stand for the playing of the national anthem, right?
NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell calling the unanimous vote by team owners a compromise, but the NFL Players Association says it was not consulted on this change.
Gio Benitez with us live as well tonight. And Gio, as I mentioned there, one team chairman saying today that the team will pay for his players if they choose to kneel.
That's right, David. We're talking about Chris Johnson, chairman of the Jets. He says he's not going to discourage players from taking a knee. He'll pay if he has to. And the Players Union says it's ready to challenge this if it needs to. David?
Let's break some of this down. Roger Goodell and the NFL and the owners, by enacting this policy, are saying unequivocally that kneeling during the national anthem is disrespect for the anthem and also for the flag. Now, that's one thing that Colin Kaepernick and company have denied. We're not disrespecting the flag. We're not disrespecting the anthem. No, excuse me. Yes, you are. That's not only the NFL's position. That's also the position of the majority of Americans. So let's not go past. Also, it was a unanimous vote. Now, that's being called into question because two teams, the Bay Area teams, abstained from the vote. So all 32 owners did not vote. 30 owners voted. And one of the ones that voted in favor of the policy said that he would pay the fine. Let's get back to the fine. If you're on the field and you're associated with the NFL, if the NFL has a contract or some type of association with you, then during the playing of the national anthem, if you're on the field, you will stand. If you don't want to stand during the playing of the national anthem, don't be on the field. If you're a player, you can be in the locker room. If you're not a player, you can find someplace else to be. Just don't be on the field, because you will respect the anthem while you're on the field. That's it. Now, when you say that, notice what they're saying. Disrespect means you're not standing. So for all the people who are doing this whole idea of, well, I'm going to stand there with a raised fist and that's my protest, the owners and the majority of people in America would say, so what? You're not protesting. Why aren't you standing for the flag? We don't care what else you do. Well, we're locking arms in solidarity. As though teams don't lock arms on the sideline for any other reason and have done so during the national anthem. We don't care. As long as you... This is where the disconnect between NFL players and the rest of the country comes to light. The country doesn't care that you protest. They care how you protest and when. If you want to do whatever you want to do between games, fine. Knock yourself out. You're an American. You're free to make your statements. You're free to do whatever you want when you're not working. And that's how America feels about it when you're not working. The NFL Players Association complained about there being no notice to this rule change. Well, I have a question for the NFL Players Association. Did they give the NFL any notice that they were going to disrespect the flag? I don't think they did. I don't think Colin Kaepernick went to his NFLPA rep and said, y'all need to float this all back up to the league office that I'm going to sit up here and take a knee for the flag. Did he do that? Did he get approval? Did they agree to that? Was there consultation? Now, the other thing, of course, the players keep claiming that they're not disrespecting the military. They're not really disrespecting the police. They're just pointing out issues with what police do. This goes back to 2016 when Colin Kaepernick, I think it was in August before the season started, was wearing a certain pair of socks to practice.
Colin Kaepernick says he will once again sit down during the national anthem of tonight's preseason football game. Meanwhile, the embattled quarterback is embroiled in a new controversy, and it all stems from the socks he's been seen wearing during training camp last month. When you look closely at the socks, you can see it is a pig in a police hat. Late this afternoon, Kaepernick released a statement saying, quote, I wore these socks in the past because the rogue cops that are allowed to hold positions in police departments not only put the community in danger, but also put the cops that have the right intentions in danger. Kaepernick went on to say that he has family members and friends who are police officers, and the socks should not distract from his national anthem protest.
Wow. Let's break this one down. I am going to wear socks that show all police as pigs, because it doesn't, if you saw the socks, it doesn't say bad cop and then have anything else on the sock to indicate who the good cops were. It just had all cops showing as pigs. But that's not what I meant. I'm only talking about the bad. Really? I want to know what would happen if somebody were to go out and buy a T-shirt that had a picture of a black criminal, a thug. You know, the pants sagging, the gold teeth, the heavy chain with a gun pointing at somebody, and then tried to spin that as saying, I'm not here trying to paint all black folks with a broad brush. I'm just trying to show that there are some blacks out there who are rogue, and they're making things bad for the good blacks. I want to know how that would roll. How did that actually go over? It's ridiculous. Well, some of my family and friends are policemen. Man, if that doesn't sound like some of my best friends are black, I don't know what does. This is foolishness. And this is one of the reasons why this so-called protest has done nothing for the NFL but cost it money. It hasn't helped the league out at all. It definitely hasn't helped Kaepernick. He's still looking for a job. He ought to go ahead and call Johnny Football and see if he can find another team in Canada that wants his sorry behind. But he's not going to do that, because that would be capitulation and acknowledgement of what people knew before they stopped returning his phone calls. He's really not that good. That's all there is to it. He's not that good. He's had an opportunity. He's shown he's not that good. You know what his ceiling is, and it's not that high. They want to move on from that. And if you did not want to disrespect the military, back to that, then why would you do your protest at a time when the focus is not on police, but it's actually on the military? Why would you do that? Because you're progressive and you don't like anything about the country. So as many things as you can trash about the country at one time, that's what you do. That's all that is. You have to also remember that this action, this kneeling and all this other stuff, particularly the kneeling and sitting, was never anything that was practiced by even a significant percentage of players. Never. Not ever. I think maybe you got 10 to maybe 15% of players at any one time at its peak participating in any type of protest. And the NFL, again, has defined what protest is. If you are on your feet during the national anthem, we don't consider that a protest. By that definition, most of the NFL never protested. By any definition, most of the NFL never protested. Therefore, the policy doesn't bother most players. But let's go ahead and summarize this. Here's what this is really all about. The NFL is trying to avoid losing money. They've been getting killed. They've been losing ratings. They've been losing season ticket sales. They've been losing merchandise purchases. All because Colin Kaepernick started some nonsense that is based on a lie about police brutality. Police brutality is not epidemic in any community in America. And I'm sorry, most of the people who die because of police violence in this country are white. But back to what we're summarizing here. The NFL is trying to get rid of this dollar drain, season ticket sales, advertising going away, merchandising not being purchased. The public is against the protests. Let me make sure I say this clearly. The public supports everyone's right to protest. You can get about an 84% number on that. We support their right to protest. But they also say 72% that what Kaepernick did was unpatriotic. Yes, you have a right to protest. You do not have a right to tell us what your protest is. Yes, you can kneel if you want to, and you're not a patriot. Well, I am. No, you're not. You're a protester. Your protest is unpatriotic, but you have the right to protest. That's what the American people are saying. They also said, a majority, I believe it was 53%, in a poll said, I don't care what your issue is, it is never appropriate to disrespect the American flag. It is not appropriate to sit or to kneel when it is your time to stand for the flag. And at the end of the day, let's remember something about NFL players, these socially aware NFL players, if you want to call them that. What's the average career span of an NFL player? According to the Players Association, 3.3 seasons. If I'm an owner, I am not going to disrupt what I hope to be my decades-long gravy train of revenue over some clowns who won't even be here more than 3 years. But I don't want to tick them off. So how do I straddle this fence? How do I do the LBJ thing? You know, remember what he said? We got to give them a little something, enough to keep them quiet, but not enough to make a difference. I think the NFL found their balance. This is going to go on through the preseason. It's going to quiet down during the regular season, and the NFL is going to look to see whether or not the revenue drain continues. And if it does, they're going to ratchet this puppy up, because at the end of the day, we don't care about these players, nor should they. We care about the game and the money it generates. And they're going to protect that. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. freedominamericaradio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, Seattle has found more rich people to eat. The very progressive city of Seattle, progressive in its thinking and even more progressive in its governance, has come out with an employee tax. The interesting thing about it is, for one, there was not universal support among the people of Seattle for such a tax. And Brandy Cruz of Seattle did some commentary to highlight that particular point.
This week, Seattle is divided over a new tax proposal, but not just divided. The city has full-on devolved into one big, knock-down, drag-out, angry shouting match.
No head tax! No head tax! No head tax! No head tax!
I don't want that. Oh, you don't want that?
Can I make an appeal? Can I?
Yikes. So any day now at the Seattle City Council, they're going to vote on the tax at the center of all that outrage. It's called an employee tax. The city's 500 or so biggest businesses, most notably Amazon, would have to pay a fee for every hour its employees work. And the money would go to help deal with a homeless crisis that seems to be getting worse and worse by the day. Look, we know both sides of this debate. On one, people think big corporations like Amazon ought to pay to help dig us out of an affordability crisis that they helped to create in the first place. On the other, businesses worry the tax is going to be too much of a burden and will ultimately take jobs away from the city. Amazon has already threatened to do as much. And then there's the added concern that the city will get all of this new tax revenue and then squander it without making much of a difference at all. But this week has made one thing painfully clear, that regardless of what side of the debate you fall on, everyone has the same thing in common. You don't feel like your voices are being heard. How else do we wind up with this?
We want to be heard.
Are you being enforced the law?
I want to know where all the money's going. I've been emailing your office.
So I guess shouting is what you do when you feel like no one is listening. Whether it's in Seattle or anywhere else, we elect people who we hope have our best interests at heart, or who at the very least are willing to actually listen to our concerns. Because if they're not, then what are they doing there? So for the city council members who don't like the shouting and the screaming, well, maybe it's a good reminder that you should have done more listening in the first place.
Progressives in government listening. Wow. That's like trying to get somebody in the NFL to jump off sides just because the opposing quarterback is barking signals. They're disciplined over there. They don't do that. They have an agenda, and that's what they're trying to advance. Now, some of the things you come up with, you'll see that you have people. Oh, by the way, when they did vote, which is back on the 14th of May, the vote was unanimous to enact this tax. Despite the opposition that was there, despite people showing up at the council meeting asking for accountability, not only for this money that they want to raise, but for the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've already spent on their homeless problem, with one speaker saying all the money you spent and now our city looks like a scene out of a zombie apocalypse movie with all the homeless camps that are spread throughout. The head or the president of the city council acknowledged that they had failed, that the council had failed to give adequate accountability to the citizens regarding what was being done with money to help the homeless. He made that admission right before he cast his vote in favor of raising this particular tax. That kind of lets you know where you stand, doesn't it? It should. For those who do not know or are not sure, Stuart Vardy, on the day after they passed this, went on to his program and laid things out pretty bluntly from a straight economic perspective.
They did it. The socialists of the Seattle City Council pushed through a tax on workers. If you run a business there and you gross $20 million, you will have to pay the city $275 a year for every employee, and that charge will rise in future years. This fits neatly into the tax the rich nonsense that the left has been peddling for the November elections. Seattle has a homeless problem, so the city council demands money from big business. It's always the same. You've got it, we need it, pay up. Seattle is ignoring the huge jump in revenues that business has already delivered to the city. It's roughly doubled in the last 8 years, from $2 to over $4 billion. But that's not enough. It's never enough. Seattle's new tax is just another example of the left's dislike of capitalism, and big businesses in particular. Amazon and Starbucks, they are the city's two biggest employers and will be saddled with most of the bill. This is ridiculous. Amazon guy Jeff Bezos detests President Trump, and Starbucks' Howard Schultz has gone out of his way to make his company a social justice standout. But the socialists have no time for them. They are, after all, capitalists. It's called cutting off your nose to spite your face. Seattle will not solve its homeless problem with this tax, but it will chase jobs away. It should really be called ideological purity, because the socialists are not going to help their fellow citizens, but they will hurt the businesses they so thoroughly detest.
And that is the conundrum for people who are in business who actually have a progressive ideology. The more successful you are, the more at odds you will be with those who believe as you do, to the point where they will simply take the money that you earn with no regard for the effort you've put in and with no concern for the impact that it's going to have if you make sound business decisions. Remember, all Amazon has to do is leave Seattle, and they would save themselves about $12.7 million annually in taxes. Now, TLDR did put together a very short story talking about the reaction of Amazon and Starbucks to the enactment of this tax in Seattle.
The gloves are off. Two of Seattle's top employers have responded to the city's so-called Amazon tax, and they are not happy. The newly passed tax affects companies making more than $20 million a year. The idea is to raise more than $45 million annually to fund affordable housing and homeless services in Seattle. And it's been controversial, to say the least. Yesterday, Amazon's VP issued a statement saying that the company is disappointed in the decision to introduce a tax on jobs. He criticized the city council's hostile rhetoric to bigger businesses and said the decision forces Amazon to question its growth in Seattle. And today, Starbucks executive John Kelly said that the city has failed to adequately address the needs of homeless families and, quote, no one believes they will be able to make housing affordable or address opiate addiction.
That's a progressive catfight if I ever saw one. To have the leaders of Amazon and Starbucks go after a progressive city government, when they are more two of the more progressive corporate governors in this country, is just fascinating, extremely ironic. But they told the truth. I mean, they really told the truth. You can't expect us to stay here if we want to grow, where you're just going to take more of our money for nothing except for doing well. And in the case of Starbucks, you have had a grip of money. Now you want more money. When the money you had to solve the problems before, you haven't been able to demonstrate that you could pour urine out of a boot if it had directions on the bottom. Another interesting thing to me is understanding how overall this never works. Back in May of last year, Fox Business News, I think it was Charles Payne, if I remember correctly, did a report on what happens with all this taxing of the rich that progressives are so fond of.
All right, now to this. The state of Connecticut has a problem. You see, they decided to tax the rich, and now, well, guess what happened to revenue? You got it. It's less than originally forecast, but Jerry Willis, she's going to give us all the details. This always kind of happens, doesn't it?
It's unbelievable how stupid the state has been in collecting tax revenues, and now those revenues, they're collapsing. So they are $450 million short of where they thought they would be on this year's tax collections. And take a look at what this is going to mean for next year's deficit. Originally projected at $1.7 billion, it will now be $2.2 billion. Right now, the state's scrambling to find $217 million to make up the shortfall for just this year. They've only got a couple of months to do it. So they're not going to hire anybody. They're doing everything they can to shut down the taps on spending. Meanwhile, the state legislature, you know, lots of Democrats up there, they want to put in place a 16% surcharge on hedge funds. Now, it's the hedge funds who have been leading. Let's see, Edward Lampert, Paul Tudor Jones, both left because of these high taxes.
And they were big chunks, right? I mean, these guys represented huge amounts of money, right? Didn't they?
Absolutely. They're industry leaders, very well known. Connecticut was considered the number 3 place in the world for hedge funds. They are losing that position. They are losing revenue, and they are desperate. Let me tell you.
But this is a slippery slope, right? Because California's lost over 1 million people, New Jersey over 1 million people. It feels like it's a slippery slope, Jerry, and once they go down it, they can never get it back.
Well, they've put in place 2 high-income tax hikes, and they're poised to do it again. There's a little sneaky thing they're trying to put across in a bill that's about something else entirely. If that happens, God only knows what's going to happen in that fourth state.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The interesting thing about progressives is the open borders that they detest the country to have. They really would like to have those for the states, because anyone in their right mind who believes that their money should be theirs to keep simply has the option of crossing the open border from Connecticut, from California, from New York, from Illinois, into other states that will simply take less of their money. And the result is always the same. They raise taxes, they get less revenue, because they make the silly assumption that people who have money are going to sit there and be taxed. This never works. Socialism never works. The very problems that it tries to solve, it worsens. That's why Seattle's homeless problem has gotten worse. That's why homelessness is off the charts in New York City, in the state of California, and elsewhere. At some point, you need to starve the poor so that they want to become among the rich, instead of trying to eat the rich to feed the poor who never seem to get full. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. A biased FBI, which seems very reluctant to examine itself. I don't think anybody's surprised about that. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure how you do examine yourself in the way that the FBI would need to be examined. The FBI has been under a cloud since the election because of all the information that has come out about it regarding its bias against the current president. And most recently, Donald Trump, citing news reports, came out and said, you know what? The FBI was spying on me during the campaign. Of course, that was poo-pooed, and Donald Trump was called all kinds of, he's not accurate. The New York Post on the 19th of May ran a story, Cambridge professor outed as FBI informant inside the Trump campaign. Here's the interesting thing about all the statements that Donald Trump makes that people consider outrageous. There's more than a nugget of truth in there. I'm trying to remember the last time Donald Trump said something that others have considered or labeled as inaccurate, false, or a lie, where Donald Trump was not at least partially, if not totally, vindicated for saying it. The record is pretty clear. But regarding this, the New York Post writes, a Cambridge professor with deep ties to both American and British intelligence has been outed as an agent who snooped on the Trump presidential campaign for the FBI. Can you help me understand why the FBI would be spying on a presidential candidate? Well, he was colluding with Russia. We're more than a year into that investigation, and we still have not seen any evidence that he colluded with Russia. So if you can't come up with evidence more than a year later, what did you have more than a year ago? You had nothing. Multiple media outlets have named Stephen Halper, 73 years old, as the secret informant who met with Trump campaign advisors Carter Page and George Papadopoulos starting in the summer of 2016. And this guy, Halper, had previously served in the Nixon, Ford, and Reagan administrations. Of course, that's to basically make him Republican, as they claim that everybody else in the FBI seems to be Republican, although these Republicans seem to act much more like progressive Democrats. Now, Trump found out about this, and he put this on a tweet. He said, if the FBI or DOJ was infiltrating a campaign for the benefit of another campaign, that is a really big deal. And he was calling for the FBI to release additional documents to Congress. I like this about Trump. He calls people out and says, you know what? Don't believe me. But why don't you just give the documents to Congress and let them figure out? In other words, shine the light of day on this stuff, and let's see what gets illuminated. Let's just put it out there and see what happens. The Halper revelation also shows the Obama administration's FBI began prying into the opposing party's presidential nominee earlier than it had previously admitted. Wow. So this was not only the FBI, but it was the Obama campaign involved. And for those who really think Barack Obama was not actively trying to make sure that Donald Trump did not win, if you really are still thinking that, bless your heart, that dude's dirty. And that's all there is to it. But that's not really the point of this at this juncture. Let's take a look at this from the standpoint of what's gone down with respect to the FBI. And let me tell you this. Had this stuff gone on while J. Edgar Hoover was running the FBI, then you would have had people trying to abolish the organization. There is no constitutional place for the FBI. That thing just grew up. And was pretty much put together by J. Edgar Hoover, and who ran it for decades until his death. But I don't recall anybody questioning the integrity of the FBI the way it's being questioned now. I don't remember that during all the time that J. Edgar Hoover was alive. People did not like J. Edgar Hoover. People were afraid of J. Edgar Hoover. But I don't remember anybody calling the integrity of the FBI into question while he was director. Now, does that mean it didn't happen? I'm saying I don't remember that. But now we have people whose integrity is at best questionable. James Comey? James Comey has basically shown himself to be someone who handles confidential and classified information no better than Hillary Clinton, whom he let off the hook after he publicly indicted her. I'll never forget that press conference where he basically went through everything in the statute that she did that was a violation of the statute, and then said because she did not intend to do wrong, no reasonable prosecutor would go after her. Are you serious? My deceased pit bull would have gone after her in a courtroom. There are hundreds of thousands of lawyers who would have salivated at the opportunity to try Hillary Clinton based on the information that was available with regard to her handling of classified information. Why? Because it was a case that prosecuted itself. All you had to do was wheel the information in there on a U-Haul and sit back, go take a long lunch, and by the time you came back, she would be convicted. She would plea bargain. Well, no, Hillary Clinton will never plea bargain. You had to convict that witch. But nevertheless, that was James Comey. And now he's written a book and done everything. He has done everything except find himself indicted. And why he's not indicted is interesting to me. And it also demonstrates to me that the current FBI and Department of Justice isn't necessarily on the up and up. That's just what it tells me. But we have Comey, we have Andrew McCabe, who lied and therefore was terminated, forfeiting some portion of his retirement benefits, which was appropriate. You have, I believe, Lisa Stage and her boyfriend, both FBI operatives, who are not only working in the FBI and working on this Trump investigation, they are also working on each other. When you put all that together, you have Page, you have McCabe, Page and Sturzock, McCabe, Comey, all of them FBI, all of them displaying a noticeable animus toward, if not outright disdain for, the current president. And this going on before there was even an election. No objectivity. People coming up with things that aren't true, but there's no investigation by the FBI. That's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. And now the FBI, the same FBI of Comey and McCabe and Page, they are the ones who put Stephen Halper in as an informant within the Trump campaign. So that's another FBI guy. Oh, and of course the guy running the investigation into Trump, the special counselor, you guessed it, Robert Mueller, a former FBI director. I will just submit it this way. The FBI has, in and of itself, a conflict of interest trying to look into Trump. They have no objectivity. They have demonstrated a bias toward the object of their investigation, and they should be kept as far away from it as possible. That's not going to happen, likely, as long as Robert Mueller's running things. This whole thing is a setup. Is it outrageous? Yes. Does it really smack of this deep state operation that we've heard a lot about? Yes. But is it coincidental? This is just all a coincidence. Let me help you out. You can't get Ray Charles and Helen Keller to have a conversation with Stevie Wonder about whether or not this is coincidence. This is as clear as the nose on several faces that this is a witch hunt, that this is a setup, that this is a frame-up, that it is simply an effort to undo by political means what the American people have done by electoral means. And so in the meantime, we still are going on with this nonsense investigation. And despite the evidence, the progressives are going to ride that old horse like the Lone Ranger rode Silver. They're going to do something. They're going to get something out of it. I just don't know what it is. And hopefully it's nothing of consequence. But they're going to keep this up. Unless, of course, you stop them, and you do have an election coming up in a while that could so weaken the Democrats if you vote that way that it doesn't matter what Mueller comes up with, because you're not going to indict a sitting president, by the way. That's not going to happen. So bear in mind, not about Donald Trump, but more about this. If you let them get away with this, then no choice of the people is ever safe from the agitation of political enemies. Therefore, you need to stop this. Not to protect Trump from the FBI, but to protect yourself from the United States government. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. I want to go ahead and give a shout out to one of my listeners in Atlanta, Georgia. That would be Dexter Porter. He and I go back and forth on social media. He is quite different politically, has quite the different view than mine on various topics, but at the end of the day, he seems to be a pretty good guy, so I'm not upset with him. Hope you're listening, Dexter, and hope everything's going well with you. Let's kind of bring ourselves to this. Where guns are, mass shootings are not. We've had a lot of issues going on with school shootings, and they're reported, and it's the worst thing that can happen. I'm not trying to say they're good, but they don't always turn out the way the media would have you believe. Everything is not Parkland. Everything is not Sandy Hook. As a matter of fact, this month in Illinois, we had the following occur.
Thank you. Again, as the mayor stated, my name is Steve Howell, Chief of Dixon Police Department. I'll try to be brief. This morning, May 16, 2018, at approximately 8:06 a.m., the Dixon Police Department received a report of an armed male subject in the Dixon High School. The information was put out by our school resource officer that is assigned to that school. Dixon Police, along with the Lee County Sheriff's Department, Illinois State Police, Stanley Police Department, responded to the scene. The preliminary investigation currently showed the suspect had fired several shots near the West Gym. At that point, he was confronted by the school resource officer. When confronted, the suspect exited the school and began running westbound on Armory Drive. The school resource officer pursued the suspect. While pursuing the suspect shot several rounds towards the officer, at which time the officer returned fire and struck the suspect. Shortly thereafter, the suspect was taken into custody just west of Dixon High School. The suspect was transported and is receiving medical attention. It is believed the injury to the suspect is non-life-threatening. At this time, the name of the suspect and the name of the officer are not being released. The officer will be placed on paid administrative leave per policy. The FBI, as well as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, responded and assisted local law enforcement as well. The Dixon High School and all Dixon public schools initially were placed on lockdown. Currently, the Dixon High School remains the only school on lockdown. Due to the quick response of the Dixon High School school resource officer, as well as all assisting agencies, there were no injuries to staff, students, or any other community members. Furthermore, the Dixon Police Department, along with assisting agencies, believe there is no further threat to the safety of the students, staff, or community. The investigation is ongoing, and we are confident that the suspect acted alone. The suspect is a 19-year-old male and was previously a student at the Dixon High School. We would also like to add that the students and staff responded to this situation extremely well. The district has been receiving ongoing training from the Dixon Police Department how to respond to these situations. While removing students from the various classrooms, responding officers found the staff, students had barricaded the doors to the classrooms with desks, bookcases, and other objects per the training that they had been received. I could not be more proud of the police officer and the way he responded to the situation. With shots ringing out through the hallways of the school, he charged toward the suspect and confronted him head-on. Because of his heroic actions, countless lives were saved. We are forever indebted to him for his service and his bravery.
Let's recap. Kid brings gun to school in Illinois, high school. He starts shooting. A school cop, a resource officer, confronts the kid, shoots sane. No one else is injured. Now, what I didn't hear in that story or anywhere else in the news was where Soy Boy, David Hogg, or Buzzcut Girl, Emma Gonzalez, could be reached for comment on this school officer's response and how it saved lives. No one was even injured. Now, so where a gun was found when someone else brought a gun, the sworn officer who had a gun trumped the kid who just wanted to do harm to people. Isn't that interesting? Now, if this were an isolated incident, then I guess we could say one just cancels out the other, we move on. But back in March, which would be the month after the Parkland shooting, we had a different event in Maryland.
Another shooting at an American high school.
You know, this is what we train for, this is what we prepare for, and this is what we pray that we never have to do.
But this time, the armed officer assigned to protect students at Great Mills High School in Maryland confronted the shooter. Authorities say Deputy First Class Blaine Gaskill fired at the same time the suspect turned the gun on himself. 2 students were shot and taken to the hospital. The shooter, a 17-year-old student at the school, is dead.
That's what we're talking about right now across the country. And, you know, the notion of it can't happen here is no longer a notion.
It's a stark contrast to what happened in Parkland, Florida, where investigators say the sheriff's deputy assigned to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School waited outside while 17 people were shot to death inside the building. Meanwhile, Gaskill is being credited with stopping the shooter from taking lives.
We're a very tight-knit community, and so now what I would ask our community to do would be pray for those victims and hope that we can return to some type of normalcy in our schools and in our community.
For InsideEdition.com, I'm Mara Matsobani.
So we have another school shooting situation in Maryland where there's a school resource officer. The school comes in. He actually does end up injuring a couple of kids, but he's confronted by a school resource officer, and he ends up dying. Now, there seems to have been, at the time of my research, some question whether the officer's bullet killed him or the kid who had turned a gun on himself actually took himself out. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter. The issue comes down to this. When the guy was at school with a gun looking to kill people, someone else with a gun confronted him, and he didn't kill anybody except maybe himself. So I guess you could say if you want to protect kids in school from being shot, having someone there with a gun to shoot the shooter is not a bad idea. Because in these two incidences, you had two shooters at two schools and no student died by the gunman's design. His design was to kill people. He didn't manage to kill anybody, except the one who maybe he wanted to commit suicide. And guess what? That doesn't bother me as much as carnage at a school. If only it stopped there. On the 25th of May, wasn't a school, wasn't even a law enforcement officer, but in Oklahoma, we had a very interesting thing occur.
A gunman who opened fire in a restaurant in Oklahoma City late Thursday was himself shot dead by an armed passerby. That was according to the local police, who also said 2 people were wounded by the gunman before he was killed. Local media reported that the wounded pair were a mother and a daughter celebrating a birthday. They were expected to survive after being taken to a hospital.
My granddaughter's out of surgery, and they're just waiting to go see her in recovery.
2 others sustained injuries, although it was unclear how.
The only person that we know is deceased right now is going to be the suspect. And the suspect exited the establishment. He was confronted by a citizen. The citizen had a weapon, took out his weapon, and shot the suspect.
The motive for the shooting is currently under investigation, and the identity of the gunman has not been confirmed. A similar incident occurred last month in Nashville, Tennessee, when a nearly nude gunman shot 4 people in a Waffle House before a bystander wrestled the gun away from him. Calls for tighter gun control in the United States were also renewed last week after 13 people were killed in a school shooting in Texas.
It's not surprising that the mention of the Santa Fe High School, Texas school shooting crept into that report. But also, remember what you just heard. Guy goes into a restaurant, not a school, comes there with a gun, starts shooting, managed to injure 2 people. But someone who's not a cop, someone who's just a American citizen, carrying a gun, which is legal to do in these United States, thank goodness, saw what he was doing and shot him dead. For those who think this is a bad outcome, I don't know what's wrong with you. I would that everybody who desired to carry a gun do so. And I guarantee you that some of this nonsense shooting would come to an abrupt halt. Because what you have, for the most part, are people believing that they're going in with superior firepower, but inferior courage. And if someone were to meet them with the same ability to do harm that they have, they will run, they will flee, they will succumb. And sometimes it is simple resolve that is enough to stop these terrible things from occurring. How many of you remember this from December of last year at a school?
In a science classroom in Utah this week, more than 24 kids were trapped by a classmate armed with 2 guns. That's where the story takes a surprising turn. Here's Carter Evans.
Student with a gun at Miller Park Junior High in Bountiful.
This time it was a 9th grader armed with a 12-gauge shotgun, a 9mm pistol, and boxes of ammunition. A teacher called 911.
He has a gun. He has a gun.
But this time, the outcome was so much different.
Where's the student now with the gun? Yes, his parents have him and both the loaded guns. Parents have the student? Yes.
The parents ran to the room, entered the room, were able to grab hold of the firearms.
Chief Tom Ross says the gunman's parents noticed he was behaving oddly at home that morning. When they found 2 guns missing from their safe, they headed straight to school.
And when they were just a short distance away, actually heard a gunshot fired.
26 students were in the classroom when the teen fired the shotgun into the ceiling. Dan Fowers was watching.
I heard a gun cock, and then I looked up. I saw the shot go off. Everyone got under a desk, and I saw some people crying.
Students reunited with their parents outside. Dan's mom, Kristen, says they're lucky.
I'm so grateful to those parents. I'm so grateful that they were, paying attention, because the outcome could have been so much worse.
The gunman's parents still haven't spoken publicly. Scott, right now their 15-year-old son is at a Utah juvenile detention facility on weapons charges.
Carter Evans in our L.A. newsroom. Carter, thank you.
Again, no buzz cut, no soy boy. Of course, they had not had their moment in the sun quite yet. And no rhino jackassery from Marco Rubio. See, here's what happens when America works correctly. People who care about a community take care of a community and protect it against those who would do it harm. That's what you just got 4 examples of. And in the last one, it is a lesson in parenting. Not a lesson in whether or not someone can get hold of guns, but they went there and dealt with their child, and no one was harmed, though he took a gun to school. And they're not out there trying to make statements about what should happen and what didn't happen. They simply corrected a bad situation. Let me make sure you get this straight. Where guns are, mass shootings aren't. And where parents are, students don't do a whole lot of mass shooting. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin'.
The most powerful man on earth cannot protect himself on social media? Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, we all know how vile and nasty leftist activists, professors, and students can be when they spew their politically charged and Saul Alinsky-inspired philosophical hatred toward those of us who like and appreciate this republic. They are no less vicious in their direct attacks against President Trump on social media. So rather than engage such foolishness, the president has blocked those who only attack him and his family with lowbrow name-calling. However, Judge Naomi Reese Buchwald of the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of New York has ruled that the president does not have the right to block vicious haters because he is the president of the United States of all the people, and that they can say whatever they want, and he has to take it. Well, apparently that judge isn't too bright. The First Amendment recognizes our right of free speech, but that does not mean others are forced to sit and take abusive language if they do not want to hear that. Hopefully the president will ignore that foolish judge and exercise his freedom to block away. I'm Ron Edwards.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin'.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Men Thinkin'.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Men Thinkin'.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3. Well, this Me Too movement continues to expose itself as the No Men movement. Because that's really what it's all about. It's about removing men from power and replacing them with women. And that's it. And it's all about telling lies in order to do it. Let me go on record for all who doubt my position. I don't want there to be any question. Women are lying. Wholesale lying. And they have now created a culture in which every lie a woman tells is to be believed first and then must be disproven, as opposed to her making an allegation against a man with proof. And what they will point to is look at Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was convicted on something that would have barely got out of a civil trial. There was no real evidence against him. There was more exculpatory evidence regarding the behavior of his accuser. And there was a mistrial. And then they let in on the second trial evidence that was deemed too prejudicial in the first trial. And then they got this BS quote-unquote conviction on an 80-year-old man. Okay. Yeah, but he did some bad stuff. So they say. So they say. Morgan Freeman hasn't done this stuff. Why'd you bring up Morgan Freeman? Oh, you hadn't heard? Well, he's the latest dude in the crosshairs.
Legendary actor Morgan Freeman is being accused of inappropriate behavior by 8 women. In a CNN exclusive, a young production assistant tells the outlet she worked on Freeman's movie Going in Style and alleges that the actor, quote, subjected her to unwanted touching and comments about her figure and clothing on a near daily basis. Going on to say that Freeman allegedly tried to lift her skirt and asked her if she was wearing underwear. She went on to claim that Freeman only stopped once when his co-star Alan Arkin told him to. But according to other sources that spoke to CNN, Freeman's alleged sexual misconduct was not limited to one movie set. A female production staffer from his 2012 movie, Now You See Me, tells CNN that the actor, quote, sexually harassed her and her female assistant on numerous occasions by making comments about their bodies. Altogether, 16 people spoke to CNN about Freeman for that investigation, 8 of whom said they were victims of the alleged harassment, while others called it inappropriate behavior. Now, the other 8 people said that they witnessed Freeman's alleged conduct. Morgan Freeman released a statement to People regarding the allegation, saying, quote, anyone who knows me or has worked with me knows I am not someone who would intentionally offend or knowingly make anyone feel uneasy. I apologize to anyone who felt uncomfortable or disrespected. That was never my intent.
What I didn't hear was harassment. What I didn't hear was sexual assault. What I didn't hear was rape. What I didn't hear was anything that even crossed over into illegal behavior at all. At all. Let me break this down for you with respect to Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, for those who do not know, is black, just like Bill Cosby. Before Bill Cosby made the now infamous pound cake speech, no one was trying to take Cosby down. At least not these type of efforts, not the efforts, the full-fledged, let's find every lying chick in America and whoever had anything to do with Cosby. Are you trying to say he didn't drug those girls? I didn't say he didn't. You're trying to say he didn't say, you know what? But if they really had the problem that they said they had, if they had really felt so violated as they claim to have, you don't wait decades to talk about it when nothing can be established, when nothing can be proven. I'm sorry, that's why they have a statute of limitations. Bring it up when it happens if you really think it's a crime. If it's not important enough to you to seek correction or retribution against the person who did it when it happened, it's not important enough to me to consider it 30 years after the fact. I don't care. I don't care. Well, it really changed my life. Really? How did it change your life? If it changed your life so much, you must have liked the change. Otherwise, you would have done something about it. You're being very harsh. No, I just recognize that women lie. I remember what happened to Brian Banks. I remember what happened to Clarence Thomas. I remember what happened to Herman Cain. I remember what happened to Roy Moore. I remember what happened to all these guys, the Duke lacrosse team, whatever happened at the University of Virginia. All the guys who get let out later after some woman accuses them of rape and the DNA comes back. All the folks who go on Maury Povich's show, and now they even have a court show where they're basically reading out DNA results, and all the women who know good and well, you know that's your baby until the DNA comes back and says with 99.98% certainty. Women lie. Period. And in the same way that Bill Cosby was not targeted until after that pound cake speech, if Morgan Freeman had not sat down with Mike Wallace and said he didn't want Black History Month, he thought it was a waste of time, and that the way to deal with race relations is to stop talking about race. I won't call you a white man. You don't call me a black man. My name is Morgan. Your name is Mike. And let's move on from there. Because you have to understand something about black men who are prominent in entertainment and progressivism. You're seeing it with the backlash against, what's his name, Kanye West. You're seeing it with Meek Mill being intimidated and punked by Jay-Z. Progressives, white progressives, treat all black people, especially those who are prominent, as their personal pets. You think what we want you to think, you say what we want you to say, and if you're actually talented at something, or people at least think you're talented, then you know what? We will allow you to have certain things that the rest of the pets don't have. But you better stay in your lane and know your role. Morgan Freeman didn't stay in his lane. You'll notice that. He didn't. And so what we're going to do is the same thing we've done to a bunch of men. We're going to get up a bunch of women to sit up there and cry and talk about how embarrassed and how hurt they were and lie through their teeth and bring this guy down. And because he's black, nobody's going to protect him, especially not black folks. They're not going to protect him. Have you noticed that about this whole thing? That they don't. Wow. For his part, Morgan Freeman tried to defend himself. This was recorded back on the 26th of May.
An A-lister apologizing again over accusations of sexual harassment and misconduct.
But actor Morgan Freeman wants to make it very clear he didn't assault women. KCAL 9's Christy Fajardo explains what he's apologizing for.
I get to look at you and drool.
Banter that some find creepy, Morgan Freeman insists was good-natured. The actor is firing back against sexual misconduct allegations in a second statement, saying all victims of assault and harassment deserve to be heard, and we need to listen to them. But it is not right to equate horrific incidents of sexual assault with misplaced compliments or humor.
Right when I walked into the room, he began to make sexually suggestive comments to me.
On Thursday, CNN reporter Chloe Melas described how her own uncomfortable encounter with Freeman led to months of investigation and to at least 8 women who described unwanted touching or comments by the legendary actor. Melas says she was in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy when she interviewed Freeman. She says watch his co-star's reaction after this exchange.
One time I congratulated a woman on being pregnant, and she wasn't. And so I've never done it again. For 50 years, I've never done it.
You've learned your lesson.
I learned my lesson.
Lord, do I wish I was there.
She says he was looking at her when he said that, and it followed other sexual comments that weren't on camera. In a statement Friday night, Freeman apologized again and wrote, "I admit that I am someone who feels a need to try to make women and men feel appreciated and at ease around me. As part of that, I would often try to joke with and compliment women in what I thought was a lighthearted and humorous way." And added, "But I also want to be clear, I did not create unsafe work environments. I did not assault women. I did not offer employment or advancement in exchange for sex. Any suggestion that I did so is completely false." And some celebrities are coming to his defense. Actor James Caan telling TMZ Freeman is a good guy.
We're becoming a very strange place.
Yeah, Morgan's a great guy. We all know.
I mean, I think that's why God made men and women, so they could be attracted to each other.
Thank you. Christy Fajardo, KCAL 9 News.
And that's what this is actually about. This is not a battle between the sexes. This is about the differences between the sexes and the fact that the feminist movement, which is the only ones who are empowered in Hollywood and the media, don't like the differences. Men and women are supposed to be attracted to one another. Of course, you can turn that on its head in Hollywood and in other places. But let me make sure you understand, this is a war on men to remove them from a natural place of authority. Simple as that. It comes down to just that. Women want men to have no positions of power because they want to compete against men, but they're not willing to do it fairly. They know they would not win. They know that, otherwise they wouldn't be lying about men. And because they are no longer comfortable with femininity. Because it is femininity that gets compliments, not just physical appearances. There's something that goes with it. Physical appearance will get you noticed. But there's supposed to be some femininity. They don't want femininity. They want to be like men. Yes, they do. That doesn't mean they want to necessarily be lesbian. They just simply want to be like men. And that means they have to have the power that men have. And until they get it, they're going to keep this little war up because it is a war on men. It is continuing. So until men stop listening to this Me Too nonsense from women and start punishing the men who do listen to it, let me help you out with this. You got a lot of punks in your ranks, men, who are trying to tell you that women are right. They're not right. They never have been right about this stuff. And until you start telling those little Y chromosome renters to take a hike, then you know what? You're fighting a war on two fronts. You might want to first take care of the Y chromosome renters, those who say they are men and they are not, and then turn your attention to the women who lie through their teeth. Because if they prevail, you're not going to have any power. And a society that does not have men at the helm has never survived. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ. Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Abortion. Well, for those who wonder, abortion does to women's minds often what it does to children's bodies always. Tears them up. It does. An organization known as Silent Voices put this audio out in 2011 to deal with women that they had helped or to allow them to tell their stories.
For the longest time, I just held the secret inside, and
I started getting really depressed. I never went a day without crying.
I would really just have to grab a hold of myself emotionally and get through the day. And when I would go home, I'd just open the door and just fall on the ground.
The self-hatred and the loss of my self-respect was just so huge. Yet I didn't really realize and connected it to the abortion.
And then I realized, this isn't me. Does God really want me to torture myself like this? Does God really want me to hurt like this? And then I realized it wasn't God. And I needed to go to a place where God was there and God was present.
I was led there, I'm sure, because I was in such pain. And though praying to God and asking for forgiveness and knowing that I'm loved, I still was hurting so much. So I knew I needed some help. I couldn't do it by myself, and I couldn't do it just with my friends. So I ended up with Silent Voices.
I was really struggling inside because I thought, what a weird thing could this be? What are women going to go in there and talk about their experiences? And I was so afraid. All I kept thinking was, how am I going to say I had 4? I'm going to lie and just say I had 1. I mean, I was so ashamed.
I thought, no one else is going through this. This is just me. And hearing the other women's experiences, and I realized I wasn't alone. And in a sense, I was lucky, too, that I came to my realization, that God was standing there with his arms open. I just needed to go in.
I realized that God wasn't there to point his finger at me. But I was able to talk even more about the abortion because I knew that talking was going to help me, and that there were young people, too, much older than I, ladies there, and that some of them were still suffering even after, I think, 14 or 15 years.
I was able to grieve over the loss of my children, and that there just sent a flood of freedom out.
You don't feel alone with Silent Voices. You feel loved, you feel set free, and you feel blessed.
I was so afraid that I was going to be condemned because of how many abortions I had had. And all they did was love me.
To me, it's the path. It was the path for me, and I could use it again.
Quite a few women having terrible results, dealing with the aftermath, dealing with that emotionally, dealing with that mentally. Here's another story. There was a black woman in that particular piece of audio, but for those who remember the singing group TLC, black female singing group, the member known as Chili, in 2010 she spoke of her abortion experience and how it impacted her.
Tell me about a boyfriend. Who stands out in your mind?
When I was in TLC, the first producer that we worked with was Dallas Austin. I was in the relationship. I got pregnant, first time, and I didn't have the support, and so I was so scared, and I didn't know what to do, and chose to not have it. One of the biggest mistakes.
Why was it the biggest mistake?
Because I didn't want to do that.
Did you feel forced?
I'm 20. My career hadn't even really started, so how do I do all that?
Yeah.
How can I be a mommy? It messed me up. I don't know. It broke my spirit. That's what it did. Mm-hmm.
It changed you from what to what?
I feel like I became, I don't know, kind of like, not my strong self anymore. I felt like I gave in and I broke to what someone else wanted. And I would break down and I would just cry. Because I can't believe I'm crying. Because I wasn't a mommy. I cried almost every day for almost 9 years. And then I was caught up. I had to have the baby. And I had to fix it. And the only way I could fix it was with that person. I could only have this baby with him because the baby that I didn't have was with him. As time went on, I was just able to break away from the relationship because I knew that he was always being true to himself. I was not. I was compromising who I was as a person to please this person. And I think so many women do that. You shouldn't, but whatever, it happens. The next relationship was with Usher.
The next relationship was with Usher. That relationship didn't last either. I bring that up because this sounds so typical of black females today, younger black females today. Notice in all of her conversations, she never referred to the baby as anything other than it. She basically does not acknowledge God's part in anything. And she actually thought she could fix the situation by having a baby with the same man whose baby she had killed. Probably or possibly because he didn't want to have a baby. He just wanted to have sex with a pretty girl. And she's 20 and she's available because she wants to be available because she wants to have a career. And she chose that career, which I don't know how well it turned out, to be honest with you. She chose that career, which is not her God-given purpose, over childbirth, which is a woman's God-given purpose. That's not to say that every woman will have a child, but that is a woman's God-given purpose. When you deny what you were put here by God to do, and do it in a very violent way, which abortion is, I don't know why you would be surprised that people have problems with that. I don't understand why you would. There was a study done back in 2011, and it was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry. It was an analysis involving 877,000 women, of whom 164,000 had abortions. They did rigorous analysis, and they found that women who have an abortion have an 81% higher risk of subsequent mental health problems compared to those who do not. And it broke down this way: 34% higher rates of anxiety, 37% higher rates of depression, 110% higher rates of alcohol abuse, 155% higher rates of suicide, and also there was a 220% higher rate of marijuana use. Wow. Now, there was another study that was done subsequently, because those numbers are horrific, called the Turnaway study. Now, that first study, it controlled for variables such as prior history of mental health problems and used appropriate comparison groups to come up with the numbers. In other words, they did a rigorous study. They got rid of nonsense information and just focused on the things where there were differences that they could support. There was another study called the Turnaway study that purports to debunk that original one, and that just consisted of phone interviews of women 1 week after having an abortion, and then every 6 months for 5 years. Grand total of 558 women participated all the way through the last interview, and the study threw away the responses of all others except those 558 women. So they're going to use a study with 558 women to debunk the findings of a study that included 877,000 women. Really? But that's how progressivism works. They're not willing to do the hard work. They don't care. Here's what you really need to understand. All this stuff that ties up with feminism, which is a denial of the femininity of women, which is the denial of what that femininity requires. Childbirth is part of it. Childbirth is part of being a woman. It is. Again, not every woman is going to have that as part of her life for one reason or another. But whether or not they can, acceptance of and submission to that part of them that is God-given is a significant portion of their mental well-being. Period. You don't have to want to believe it. I don't care whether or not you do, to be honest with you. But if you're going to start taking America back, make America great again, yeah, later for all that nonsense. If you're going to start making people whole again, if you're going to get rid of the homosexual agenda, if you're going to get rid of this whole culture we have where we have so devalued life that nobody wants to maintain any reasonable rules that are based on what is obvious to everyone. There aren't 57 genders. There's only 2. Everybody shouldn't be married. If you shouldn't be married to someone who has the same genitalia as you. It just doesn't work. It's never supposed to work. It's not appropriate. It is immoral. And you should never be telling women that the best way to deal with a pregnancy is to kill what God has knit together in the womb. Well, you don't know her life's going to be this. So what you're trying to tell me is God didn't know what her life would be like if she has this child? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That God didn't know in those unfortunate cases whether or not she was going to be raped? He didn't know that she was raped? He said, oh, that one got by me. That baby slipped by me. I didn't mean that one. Godlessness, particularly among women, is killing Western society. Killing it. And what you have done to women to convince them that denying their God-given purpose to the point where they are actually destroying life that is growing within themselves, yeah, that's going to cause some problems for folks who have to think about that. It's going to cause some spiritual problems that you can't get rid of by ideology. You can talk around it, but you know what? When all the crowds are gone, when all the ideological adherents are no longer in your presence, what you are going to hear is the sound of your conscience and the sound of your spirit, and abortion puts awful sounds in both. You need to stop this because you're not only destroying children, but you're creating a crop of mentally torn up women, all because you tried to tell them to do something that they should not do and tried to say that it was all right. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5, North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. This is something that continues to upset me. I'm going to say this very clearly at the outset. Police body cams are hurting black people. Not police brutality, not being shot by police, which happens less frequently than the left would have you believe, particularly in light of other things that kill black people, including being shot by black people. Police body cams and dash cams are hurting black people. The way they are hurting black people is they are showing them as interactional incompetence. They're making black people look weak, like they don't know how to deal with any situation, like they don't belong in any society in which anyone exists who doesn't look like them. That's what's happening. I can go on and on. It's not hard. I can go back to Dorothy Bland, the college professor in Texas, who was walking in the middle of the street, waving her arms like she was escaped from an insane asylum, stopped by police, and then wants to tell everyone that she's been harassed. When it's caught on tape where all they did was come up behind her, see what she was doing, and talk to her about walking on the sidewalk instead of walking in the middle of the street. She looks like a fool to everyone other than other black people. You had recently the NAACP president in South Carolina who was pulled over for a traffic stop because he made a turn without signaling, and also because he had switched the plates from one vehicle to another. He was driving a very nice Mercedes-Benz, and he had put on it plates from a 1992 truck. The officer who stopped him was very cordial, didn't even give him a citation, and this gentleman, Jamie Moultrie, went on Facebook and said he had been racially profiled. But these are the people who are going to try to tell the rest of the country that it's time for us to have a serious discussion about race. You can't even tell the truth about your interaction with police. You can't have a serious discussion about anything. And then there's the real embarrassing stuff. For example, back on the 13th of April in Baltimore, this happened to someone who was actually associated with city government.
A common sight all over the city. Doesn't matter if parking spaces are available, but it's illegal.
Bickerton, I have a car stop 200 block.
Back on April 13th, a city police sergeant attempted to enforce the law.
How you doing, sir? Sergeant McGowan, Baltimore City Police. This interaction is being recorded. I need your license and registration.
The driver is Marvin McKinstry, the chair of a task force appointed to improve civilian oversight of city police under the DOJ consent decree. He had just dropped off a passenger.
Are you refusing to give me your license and registration, sir? It's a lawful order.
The officer has every right to approach the vehicle and do it exactly as the officer did here. It would raise suspicions if somebody decides to not comply.
License and registration, sir. Can I just get an estimate on how many times I have to say this to you, sir?
You don't have to
license and registration, sir.
That I'm not going to cooperate with you having a problem with me dropping off a passenger.
This gentleman was being defiant from the beginning. The officer would have simply probably cited him or even given him a warning.
Because he stopped me for letting my colleague
license and registration.
For what?
Or you will be subject to arrest. I don't need you to let me. I don't need you to let me, sir. Because I think that you're letting your emotion get the better of you, sir.
McKinstry finally handed over his license. He got 5 tickets totaling $500. He refused to sign them.
There's your license. You're free to go. Do not stop in the middle of traffic, whether you have your flashers on or not. It's against the law. Have a nice day. Thanks for your cooperation.
According to the mayor's office, the police told them that the tickets have not been satisfied. McKinstry has not responded to repeated requests for an interview. Reporting live in East Baltimore, David Collins, WBAL TV 11 News.
That is, let me just say it, that was a black man demonstrating what is stereotypically called mad black woman behavior. Trying to say, well, there's no emotion. No, it's 100% emotion. He turned what should have been over in 5 minutes. They shortened it for the news story. He turned what could have been a 5-minute conversation where all he did was talk about what he had done, given the officer his information, and moved on into a 45-minute traffic stop in which he was threatened with arrest because he did not want to give up his license and registration. He did at the end, and you saw the officer said, here are your tickets, here's your license, have a nice day. Could have been done in a lot less time, a lot less drama. He made black men in positions of authority look incompetent. That's incompetence. You want to have a conversation with people about race, and you can't even follow the law when asked by a law enforcement officer who's doing you no harm whatsoever. And it's all caught on camera. The Moultrie thing was caught on camera. The Dorothy Bland thing was caught on camera. There are numerous events where black people are demonstrating they don't have basic coping skills, and it's caught on camera. And unfortunately, that includes this interaction between law enforcement and a black male in Sacramento, California, from May 4th of this year. Now let me give you a little background before I play this audio. A police officer came to a convenience store where he saw a car that was running, engine running, radio blasting, and no driver. No one was in the car. Leaving your car running with no one in it is a violation of state law in California. The officer turned off the vehicle, turned off the radio, which was basically he was disturbing the peace with the volume at which he was playing his radio. And he waited for the gentleman who belonged with that car to come outside. That is where we pick up this audio.
ID, please. 367.
I didn't break no law. You do not even what?
I have a subject stop.
But you don't have a.
So you have your car running.
That has nothing to do with what's going on.
It's a misdemeanor to leave your car running.
What's going on, man?
Plus, you had your stereo loud to where it can be heard. I need your driver's license.
Nothing to do with what's going on, man.
Driver's license, please.
Why am I getting harassed?
I've already told you your car was running.
That's against the law to have your car running. I'm just asking. It's against the law to have your car running.
Yeah, if you have another unit, that'd be great.
That's all I'm asking.
It is against the law to have your car running when you're not in it.
Oh, I'm right there, though, sir.
I understand that. I understand that.
Of harassment right now. Witnesses are harassment right now.
I don't need a beeper, just another unit.
Witnesses for harassment right now.
Okay,
so just
identification.
For what? I didn't break no law.
Your car was running.
I didn't break no law.
I'm trying to tell you that you broke the law.
Please send. If I'm in trouble, I want to
set your phone down.
No,
set your phone down.
Don't record.
Set your phone down. I'm going to detain you.
Detain me for what? What are you detaining me for?
Because.
Y'all see this?
Hey,
look at this. What are you detaining me for?
I've already told you, sir.
What are you detaining me for?
I've already told you, sir.
Man, come on, man. Yeah, call the police. Call the police, man. Call the police, please. Call the police. Nah, come on, man.
Set your phone down before it gets heard.
For what, man? I didn't do nothing
wrong. I've already told you. You had your car running. I'm trying to explain to you. You did.
I have not done nothing wrong. I have not done nothing wrong. I don't know. I've done nothing wrong. Come on, man. Don't break my arm.
Give me your arm.
Don't
relax and give me your arm.
Shot kids out here.
Give me your arm.
Shot kids out here for less,
Give me your arm.
Shot kids out here for less, man.
Give me your arm.
Man, I'm a big man.
You are.
I don't want you to take me down. I don't want to take you down.
Then relax.
No, you relax. Get off. I ain't done nothing to break no laws.
You did.
I pre-record all of this.
Okay.
I've done nothing to break no law.
Give me your hand.
Hey, come on, man.
Don't grab me.
Don't grab me.
No, I'm trying to detain you, sir. Because I'm trying to explain the law to you.
Come on. No, there is no law.
Yes, there is.
There is no law for leaving the car running. I'm in the store. I'm in the store getting this. I just seen you.
Yes, there is.
Come on, you're just harassing me, man. Get off me now, man.
No, I'm going to throw you on the ground here in a second.
Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Man, what are you doing, man? Get off me.
Oh, my God.
I give up. I give up. I give up. I give up. I give up.
Lay on your stomach. Lay on your stomach.
I give up. I give up, man. I give up, man. I give up, man. Get off my arm. Come on, man.
And all that was caught on camera. I have a simple question. How many more weak black person, particularly black man videos, do we need to see before black people recognize that they are being portrayed by their behavior caught on camera as interactional incompetence? The problem is not what's behind the badge. The problem is what's in front of the badge and in front of the camera. A cop comes up to you, just asks you for your ID, tells you you're in violation of the law. Instead of engaging with him and trying to understand what's happening so that more than likely this could just end with a warning, you go immediately into mad black woman mode, talking over the officer, trying to tell him you're going to argue the law with a police officer in the field with your no law degree having, no diction possessing, can't put your phone down, and you're going to tell a cop what the law is. And then you end up in a physical altercation with a cop, and you're asking bystanders to call the police. You look and sound like a fool. You're there with a cop who's telling you you're breaking the law, and you want more cops to come because you know they're going to back you up. Seriously? This wasn't harassment. This wasn't police brutality. This was Knee-grosity. This was Negro stupidity. That's what it was. And we see more and more of that the more police body cam and dash cam videos come out. We see that black people are no longer competent to have a conversation about anything because they will turn every situation into something it never needed to be. This needs to stop. If you want anybody to take you seriously, you're going to at first have to be serious people. serious people, when a police officer comes up and confronts them about something that's going on, they don't go into you can't get a word in edgewise mode with a cop. They don't lie to cops on camera. They don't lie about cops. They don't go into histrionics, and then you want to try to tell people we need to have a serious discussion about race. You are not ready. This is the effects of about 6 decades of progressivism on the black community. You have turned men into women. You have turned men who now have leadership positions into lying women. And then you wonder why blacks have the problems that they do. Well, you got a camera full. And if you can't handle a cop in the field who's not giving you a problem, then you're not ready for any dialogue about anything that really matters. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin. We'll be back after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. And I'll do this shout out again one more time to a listener of mine in Atlanta, Georgia, Dexter Porter. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying the show. And we'll move on to our last topic. And I just call this the saddening effects of what I have termed Knee-grosity, which is an erosion of black values by progressivism. And it's something I've seen over the last several decades. It's been going on throughout my lifetime. But it has its origins for me back in the 1960s. The effects of believing and accepting what progressives tell black people about what they're worth, about what they should think about white people, about what they should think about themselves, about what they should think about their country, about what they should think about each other, has led to blacks being a people that are not God-honoring. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say we never were or now we're so much worse than everybody else. That's not the point. Blacks were a God-honoring people. I'm not trying to say everybody was a saint and everybody was in the church. But there are certain things that we understood as right and wrong, and we held to that. Even those who didn't go by a church, they at least had the decency not to speak ill of God. And to think something about those principles that had carried black people through slavery, carried black people through Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement, and now all of a sudden, we couldn't do that again because we have no spiritual or moral underpinning like we did in the 1950s and through much of the 1960s. We're no longer a self-honoring people, and by that I'm talking about the death culture. We are 13%, barely 13% of the population, but we commit 28% of violent crimes. We are 13% of the population, but we are 52% of homicide victims, and 92% of those homicide victims are killed by other blacks. We're 13% of the population, but we are 40% of those who commit murder in this country. And we kill everybody. Mostly our own, but whites, even though they outnumber us 5-1, we kill twice as many whites as whites kill blacks. We have a death culture among black people in this country that is not equaled by any other demographic. I'm just telling the truth. We have no regard for family. Only 26% of black women are married to anybody. And black men are not much better at 32%. There's no marriage in the black community. Highest rates of divorce of any demographic. Not saying we are the highest, but we are right there with the highest. We don't get together. When we get together, we don't stay together. 77.3% bastard baby rate. They don't care about these children. Just lay down with everybody. Most abortive. Highest rate of abortion of any group of females in the country. You can't put all those things together and tell me that you are honoring the family. You have no regard for marriage. You have no regard for the next generation. Either bringing them in or giving them the same situation that many of you had, which is a mother and father. There is no respect, I mean none, for men, black men in the black community. Everything has been transferred over to the woman. Our strong black sisters. You mean the same sisters who are kicking out almost 8 bastard babies for every 10 they have? You talking about the same sisters in places like New York City where they're killing more people, children in the womb than are allowed to escape the womb alive? Those sisters, the same sisters who have a 48.8% herpes infection rate, those strong blacks, miss me with that nonsense. And black men, you're not doing that much better. Your herpes infection rate is 24%. The next highest, you got to drop it down by more than a third of what black men have to find the next group that's out there. And I think it's white men. Men don't head what's going on in black communities. Black Lives Matter, not only not men, but women who don't even want men. Heterosexual females running Black Lives Matter to keep black men, unarmed black men, from getting shot. You don't even want a man, and you want me to believe that you're going to represent my best interest with the police? I don't think so. No respect for the authority of men. Look what's going on down in Georgia. Don't get me wrong. But the big push there is to have a black woman in everything. They have a black female mayor now. She's not going to bust a grape. And that's not even a slight against her. She's not going to bust a grape in Atlanta. Because Atlanta has weak men. And I'm sorry, there is no such thing as a strong enough black woman to turn around weak black men. It's not going to happen. And now they've put up a woman to run for governor in Georgia, Democrat, a black woman, who's got the same type of financial problems that everybody jumped on Trump having, and trying to say it doesn't disqualify her from being governor. Girl's got a $200,000 outstanding debt that she hasn't paid. But that doesn't disqualify her. But Trump, who is a billionaire, he's supposed to be disqualified for bankruptcies, which he got discharged. How does that work? We got problems because we don't respect men, and we keep pushing men to be raised by women. And I'm sorry, if you don't have a Y chromosome, you can't teach anybody who does have one how to act like someone who has one. You can't do it. You're not equipped. That's not a slight. That's just a fact. And we don't develop men. And as I showed in that last segment, when you put all that together, we have now become people who cannot even engage rationally on any point of importance. We don't even have an agenda. Black people do not have an agenda. Not a political one. They cannot tell you what they stand for except we don't like white racism. We believe white privilege, systemic racism, white supremacy. What's that got to do with you? What do you want? What is your agenda? What do you have in mind for your people? That they not be white? You got it. Now what's next? And that's where the blank stares come out. And that is so disheartening. This is what I mean when I say Knee-grosity. I don't want to hear another black man talk to me about strong black women. I want to hear black men talk to me about strengthening black males. I want black men to talk to me about black men getting back in control of black families so that black male children can actually grow up to be real black men instead of these angry, these mad black women who are showing up on police videos. That's what I want. If you can't give that to me, miss me with everything else. I'm not interested. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. And until next week, remember those for whom you care. Take care of yourself. And we'll see you then.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.